The shoes were still in their box. The dress hung by the window, untouched. And the room, too quiet for a wedding morning. Someone knocked gently, but she didn't answer. Instead, she stared at the untouched makeup brush in her hand, wondering why it felt like her body belonged to someone else. Everyone kept saying this would be the happiest day of her life. But something about today felt borrowed, like it wasn't really hers. Her sister, Clara, hadn't shown up yet. No calls, no texts. Which wouldn't be strange, if she weren't the maid of honor. She used to think she knew Clara better than anyone. Now, she wasn't sure if she knew her at all. The signs had been small. An unfinished sentence here. A look that lingered too long there. A comment at the rehearsal dinner that didn't sit right. "Are you sure he's the one?" Clara had asked, then smiled too quickly. It wasn't just Clara. Lately, even Ethan, her fiancé, felt like a slightly altered version of himself. Loving. Yes. But rehearsed. Like he was walking through a role he didn't fully believe in. She had chosen to ignore it. Because sometimes, that's easier than asking questions you might not want answers to. But what she hadn't expected, what she couldn't have prepared for, was what Clara would say during the speech. And how 5 words, spoken into a microphone in front of everyone, would take the entire wedding and rip it apart thread by thread. The rehearsal dinner had been loud. Laughter, clinking glasses, small speeches from distant relatives. But the only voice she remembered clearly was Clara's. She had pulled her aside in the hallway, where the lights were dimmer and the noise felt far away. "I wrote something," Clara had said, holding up a folded piece of paper. "For the speech tomorrow." There had been a flicker of something in her eyes. Hesitation? Grief? She couldn't tell. "Do you want to read it first?" Clara had asked. And just like that, there was a choice. A moment. She had smiled. "No, I trust you." It was easier to say than to admit she wasn't sure anymore. Clara had nodded, but her grip on the paper had tightened, the way someone holds a note they never meant to send. Back in the hotel room, memories came in flashes, things she'd pushed away over the years. That time Clara had disappeared for 6 weeks after college. The sudden move back home. The tear-stained pillowcases no one talked about. She'd always assumed it was heartbreak. Maybe some boy Clara didn't want to name. But now, with everything so quiet, she wasn't so sure. She looked at her phone. No messages from Clara. Just one, from her mom. "She's getting ready. Leave her be." Leave her be. Just like they always had. Growing up, it had been easy to overlook Clara's silences. She was the golden child, bright, talented, funny. But when she withdrew, the whole house seemed to sigh and say, "She just needs time." No one asked why. She thought about that moment 3 years ago. Before Ethan. When Clara had come home thin and pale, with those silent eyes. She had offered tea. A blanket. "Do you want to talk?" she had asked gently. "No. I'm fine." That was all she'd said. No names. No details. And somehow, she had believed her. But silence is a tricky thing. It doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes, it's the loudest thing in the room. She stood and paced the hotel floor, her bare feet cold against the marble. Every part of her felt alert now. Watching. Listening. There were pieces that didn't fit. The way Ethan had avoided Clara at dinners. The forced small talk. The rare occasions they were alone in the same room, and how quickly one of them would leave. She had once joked, "It's like you two can't stand each other." Neither of them had laughed. Later that afternoon, she walked down the hallway toward the ceremony. White roses lined the path. Music played softly from the speakers. But as she neared the garden doors, she spotted Clara in the distance, standing alone with Ethan. He looked tense. Clara had her arms crossed. Their mouths moved, but she couldn't hear the words. Then Ethan stepped back, running a hand through his hair. Clara turned, saw her watching, and smiled. Too quickly. Something inside her cracked, small and sharp. She didn't say anything. She just walked past them both and into the ceremony. But deep inside, a thought started echoing. What if Ethan hadn't just hurt Clara? What if Clara had never recovered? The garden was quiet the way only crowded spaces can be, filled with breath, anticipation, and the polite rustling of silk dresses. She stood under the arch of white hydrangeas, Ethan beside her, his hand steady but cold. Clara sat in the front row, her hands in her lap, paper folded neatly. She looked calm, almost detached. But Julia could see it. The slight tremor in her fingers. The way her foot tapped softly beneath the hem of her dress. Then the officiant spoke. Vows were exchanged. Applause. Kisses. Flashbulbs. And then, it was Clara's turn. She rose from her seat, walked slowly to the microphone. No cue cards, no shaky hands now. She unfolded the paper, looked at it once, and never glanced at it again. I've known Julia my whole life. Her voice was clear. Confident. Too confident. She's everything I never was. Brave. Loyal. Blindingly hopeful. She believes in people, even when she shouldn't. Especially when she shouldn't. People laughed softly. Julia forced a smile. Clara went on. Growing up with her meant always having someone in your corner. Even when you didn't deserve it. Julia's smile faltered. She shifted slightly, glanced at Ethan. He looked ahead, jaw tight. And weddings are about love, yes. But they're also about truth. And truth, she paused. Swallowed. Truth demands something from all of us. Now the garden was silent. Clara looked up. Not at Julia. At Ethan. I forgive you. A pause. Breath held. Not for what you did to me, but for pretending like it never happened. A gasp. Somewhere in the back, someone dropped a glass. Julia blinked. Ethan froze. Clara looked at the guests now, her voice calm, but brittle. I was 19. He was older. I thought it was something real. But it ended. Quietly. Cruelly. And then, he met Julia. And we never talked about it again. Eyes turned. Whispers spread. Julia couldn't feel her hands. Clara smiled sadly. I should have told her. Years ago. But I didn't want to ruin something she thought was beautiful. She turned to Julia now. Her voice softer. I thought I was protecting you. But maybe I was just protecting myself. She folded the paper. Stepped down. And walked back to her seat. The ceremony ended in a fog. There were photos. Hugs. Confused guests. But Julia didn't remember any of it. Her hands kept reaching for Ethan's without realizing it, and pulling back just as fast. She couldn't stop hearing Clara's voice. Couldn't stop seeing Ethan's face, frozen, unreadable. And worst of all, she couldn't stop wondering. Why didn't he tell her? Not just about the past. But about the way he had treated her sister like she didn't exist. And then stood beside her, every day, pretending to be someone he wasn't. Later, after the guests had left and the candles had burned low, Julia sat alone in the bridal suite. Still in her gown. Makeup smudged. There was a knock at the door. It wasn't Ethan. It was Clara. She stepped in. No words. Just a quiet moment between two sisters. Finally facing what neither of them had ever been brave enough to say. The sun rose on white flowers already wilting. The garden chairs were gone. The arch had been taken down. Only silence remained. Julia sat on the hotel balcony, her dress still draped over the chair inside. Her wedding ring lay in her palm, cool, unfamiliar. A stranger's promise. She hadn't slept. Not really. Just drifted in and out of the same dream, where Clara stood with that microphone over and over again, her voice repeating the same 5 words. I forgive you. But forgiveness didn't erase what had been done. Ethan came by mid-morning. No tie. No suit. Just guilt on his face and a rehearsed apology ready in his throat. I didn't mean to hurt you, he began. Julia didn't move. It was years ago. Before I knew you. I thought it would go away. I thought if we never talked about it. She cut him off, quietly. You didn't just hide something from me. You erased her." That landed harder than he expected. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the shape of the man she thought she loved. But love without truth is just illusion. And she was done pretending. She handed him the ring. No shouting. No tears. Just a quiet line. "You don't get to stand next to me in a white dress if you built it over someone else's silence." He left without another word. And she finally exhaled. Later that day, she went to Clara's apartment. Knocked once. Waited. When the door opened, there was no dramatic embrace. No apology speech. Just two sisters who had once shared everything, except the one truth that had almost ruined them. Clara stood back and let her in. They sat on the couch, tea between them, like they used to. Julia spoke first. "You could have told me." Clara nodded. "I know." Another pause. "Why didn't you?" Clara's voice cracked. "Because I was ashamed. And because you looked so happy. I didn't want to take that away from you." Julia leaned back, looking around Clara's small apartment. There were signs of a life lived quietly. Books. Art. Unopened letters. And suddenly, she realized Clara hadn't been absent from her life. She'd just been waiting for a safe place to return to. Julia reached for her hand. "You're not the one who should have felt ashamed." Weeks passed. The wedding photos never got printed. The dress was boxed up and sent away. The venue refunded half. But something far more valuable returned. A sisterhood restored not through perfection, but through honesty. Clara began joining Sunday dinners again. Julia started sleeping with both eyes closed. And one day, at a small family brunch, Clara reached across the table and smiled. "You're different now," she said. Julia laughed. "Yeah, I guess I am." She didn't get the wedding she planned. But she got something better. A truth that set her free. A love that didn't lie. And a sister who stayed. That day in the garden wasn't her real wedding. This one was.